February 28th, 1996. The Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the palpable tension of industry ego. The 38th Annual Grammy Awards was a night of giants. The nominees for Album of the Year included icons like Michael Jackson, Mariah Carey, and Pearl Jam. But when the words Album of the Year finally echoed through the auditorium and the announcer said her name, the room shifted.
And the Album of the Year is Jagged Little Pill. Alanis Morissette.
Thank you.
Alanis Morissette didn't leap up or scream. A 21-year-old Canadian who, less than a year earlier, had been written off by many as a commercial gamble. There is a specific kind of silence that happens when the world changes its mind. And in that moment, the industry realized that the rules of what a woman was allowed to sound like had been rewritten forever. To understand the weight of that trophy, you have to look back just 8 months earlier, when Jagged Little Pill made its quiet debut on the Billboard charts at number 117. Record executives expected it to sell modestly, just enough to justify a follow-up. No one predicted it would explode into a massive cultural release. No one predicted it would give a generation permission to feel everything out loud. But the story really began 2 years earlier in a small Hollywood studio where a 19-year-old Alanis was reaching a breaking point. She had already lived a life most teenagers could not fathom. 2 pop albums in Canada, the glittering pressure of child stardom, and the constant demand to be polished, marketable, and agreeable. But the person she was becoming no longer fit the image she was selling. She was heartbroken in a way that felt devastating. Not just a simple young love sadness, but a soul-deep, profound sorrow that left her raw and unable to pretend anymore. March 8, 1994. That was the day Glen Ballard's publishing company matched him with 19-year-old Alanis Morissette. The connection, in Ballard's words, was instant. Within 30 minutes of meeting in his home studio in California's San Fernando Valley, they were already experimenting with sounds. Ballard later told Rolling Stone that he connected with her as a person first. He was struck by her intelligence and her willingness to take a chance on something that might have no commercial application. Although there was uncertainty about what she wanted to do musically, she knew exactly what she did not want. Anything that was not authentic or from the heart. As Ballard recalled, I just connected with her as a person, and almost parenthetically, it was like, wow, you're 19? She was so intelligent and ready to take a chance on doing something that might have no commercial application. She did not want to be palatable. She wanted to pour her rawest self onto the page. Nowhere was this raw intensity more evident than in the creation of You Oughta Know. This wasn't a calculated radio hit, it was a subconscious emotional outpour. Alanis would walk into the booth when the ink wasn't even dry on the page, singing lyrics she'd listen to the next day and barely remember writing. The demo was captured on November 28, 1994, and the energy in the room was electric. By early December, they were building a masterpiece. Benmont Tench of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers arrived to record the Hammond organ, but the song still needed a certain smash. That's when Dave Navarro and Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers were recruited. Navarro noted there were no guide tracks. They just had Alanis's raw vocal to work from, and they jammed until they found a groove that matched her fire. Flea was characteristically blunt. When he heard the original, more polite bass line, he thought, that's some weak stuff. It was no flash and no smash. He played something aggressive to match the vocal, and the result detonated on the airwaves. Rock stations like K-Rock in Los Angeles didn't know what hit them. DJs froze mid-sentence, and listeners pulled their cars over. She wasn't crying softly into the microphone. She was demanding answers. As the sessions progressed, the shack became a sanctuary where Alanis could explore the flip side of rage, the terrifying reality of being seen. Head Over Feet emerged as one of the final pieces of the puzzle, the moment she stopped fighting and started healing. This wasn't another song about volatile drama or explosive heartbreak. This was about a healthy relationship, one that took her completely by surprise because it was built on something she wasn't used to: friendship. She wrote it about the slow burn of being won over by someone patient enough to see past her defenses, someone who held the door, who waited, who didn't demand anything in return. You are the bearer of unconditional things. You held your breath and the door for me. Thanks for your patience. This was love beyond the lines, attraction regardless of inhibitions. As one critic put it, this was about realizing you've fallen in love with your best friend, and she sang about it with the same intellectual rigor she brought to betrayal. Your love is thick and it swallowed me whole. Not drowning, not suffocating, just safe. The famous harmonica solo in the song? That wasn't a polished studio edition. That was Alanis playing live in the room, slightly unrefined, breathy. Ballard insisted on keeping it, because perfection wasn't the point. Truth was. And here's something most people don't know. Head Over Feet contains the earliest known use of the term friend with benefits in popular music. You're my best friend with benefits. But she didn't mean it the way we use it today. She meant someone who gave without keeping score, who showed up, who stayed. She proved you could write about healthy love with the same intensity you bring to rage. The philosophical anchor of the record, however, was You Learn. Written during a time when Alanis was grappling with intense internal pressure and the overwhelming weight of her sudden independence, the song became her survival guide. It was an anthem for self-forgiveness. Ballard encouraged her to lean into the biting off more than you can chew metaphor, turning the mistakes of her youth into a curriculum for growth. The line, "Swallow it down, what a jagged little pill," wasn't just a catchy lyric. It was a realization that pain is often the only medicine that leads to wisdom. This song shifted the album's narrative from one of someone wronged seeking a comeback to a woman taking ownership of her own evolution. But the album wasn't just a collection of rage. It was a study in the timing of life. Ironic was written early in their collaboration, born from a playful afternoon where Alanis and Glen were simply trying to make each other laugh. They were exploring the cruel joke of the universe, the way the worst things arrive exactly when you're least prepared. While critics would later spend decades nitpicking the dictionary definition of the word ironic, Alanis saw it differently. To her, the song wasn't a linguistics paper. It was an emotional truth about the absurdity of the human experience. It was about that moment when you realize you have no control and all you can do is laugh at the timing. Its lighter, acoustic-driven sound provided a necessary breath of air in an album that was otherwise heavy with shadow. The production of these tracks reflected this unpretty philosophy. Nothing felt smoothed out or comfortable. It was an album of exposed nerves, and the public couldn't get enough. Record stores sold out repeatedly. 4 months after its release, it hit #1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed in the top 10 for a staggering 72 weeks. It wasn't just a successful album, it was a shift in the tectonic plates of pop culture. By the time Grammy night arrived, Alanis had 9 nominations. When she took the stage to perform a ferocious, unfiltered version of You Oughta Know, she did it with no choreography and no costume changes. It was just a voice that refused to be polite. The impact of that night went far beyond the 4 trophies she took home. Jagged Little Pill cracked the music industry open, telling women they didn't have to choose between being messy or meaningful, soft or strong. Within 2 years, a wave of emotionally complex artists followed in her wake, and later, superstars like Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo would cite her as proof that honesty could sell millions. By the end of its initial run, the album had sold 33 million copies worldwide, becoming the best-selling debut by a female artist at the time. That 19-year-old who refused to soften her pain turned her rawness into something permanent. At 21, she stood on that stage in disbelief, but she had already changed the definition of commercial. Every artist today who writes openly about the messy reality of being human is walking through the door that Alanis Morissette kicked open without apology and without asking for permission.